Now then, let's be honest, the controversial issues surrounding the sale of Chelsea Football Club affects the whole of football. You could argue it also affects every single person in this country when a government randomly seizes control, but that's a bigger picture for another story. Meantime, with Friday's deadline for billionaires wanting to make a bid for Chelsea fast approaching, it's time to ask some important questions about the ownership of England's elite football clubs. According to the UK government, football clubs are cultural assets and the bedrock of our communities. We're committed to protecting them, announced Number 10 when explaining the decision to force Roman Abramovich out of Chelsea. But why isn't the British government blacklisting foreign owners at other clubs? What about Newcastle United and their blood-stained ownership by the Saudis? What about the human rights abuses by the powers that be in Abu Dhabi that control Manchester City? What about the Americans who seized control of the English Premier League's most famous clubs, Manchester United, Liverpool and Arsenal, and then tried to steal our heritage with a breakaway Super League? America, after all, have started more wars than any other nation in modern times, and with our help, illegally invaded Iraq in the very same year Abramovich bought Chelsea. It's currently argued the USA triggered the current conflict in the Ukraine by engaging in a proxy war with Russia. Whatever the truth, it's not a black and white situation, unless of course you're a Newcastle United fan who only cares about success at any cost. And what about sporting integrity? Manchester City's Arab owners, backed by Chinese investors, have already distorted the shape of the Premier League by ignoring financial fair play rules and getting away with it. Not to mention the subject of human rights abuses swept under the carpet. Let's not forget the man at the top who owns Manchester City is Sheikh Mansour, Deputy Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates, a country with a dubious human rights record that stands accused of war crimes in the Yemen along with Saudi Arabia. Then there's Sheikh Mansour's Newcastle United counterpart, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's been accused of being directly responsible for committing crimes against humanity in the Yemen. Like it or not, politics does affect sport, and sport has been corrupted by greed. Purists call football the beautiful game, but the ugly face of football is the one that now reigns supreme, in a world where the real evil is the money and the grubby prostitution of a once beautiful game for the benefit of the few. As we count down now to the hijacking of the World Cup by the mega-rich Arabs in Qatar, it's the human tragedy unfolding in the Ukraine that currently has global attention. But the real damage runs far, far deeper. By ignoring politics, the English Premier League has compromised its own integrity. We've allowed sportswashing to enable mega-rich foreign owners to use their wealth to distort the game, while we turn the other way and overlook a multitude of crimes against humanity. Since 2003, we know that Chelsea Football Club has built unprecedented success, funded by dirty money. Truth is, the Premier League turned a blind eye to the origins of Abramovich's huge wealth when they allowed the Russian Israeli to take control of Chelsea 19 years ago. The irony is that the UK government only bans Abramovich now from owning Chelsea because alleged war crimes in Ukraine are deemed more serious than atrocities taking place elsewhere. No one is talking about the current crimes against humanity in the Yemen, where the human suffering many believe is far worse than Ukraine. Meantime, Newcastle United are owned by a fund that is governed by Saudi Arabia, the regime slaughtering the people of Yemen. For the last 7 years, the Saudis have been waging a bloody war that has led to the deaths of an estimated 250,000 people. It's a humanitarian crisis with more than 10,000 children killed or injured since a Saudi-led coalition intervened in 2015. When Newcastle United's chief executive Amanda Staveley said it isn't fair that Abramovich is having his football club taken away, perhaps she was more concerned about the same thing happening to her own boss, Mohammed bin Salman. Football here in the UK used to be a working class sport watched by ordinary men and women who supported football clubs that were mostly owned by wealthy businessmen with a local connection. But times have certainly changed. The day English football sold its soul and opened the floodgates for predatory foreign investors was the day football in this country started to lose its identity. Mohammed Fayed became the first foreign owner at Fulham in 1997, But it wasn't until the arrival of Abramovich at Chelsea in 2003 and then the Glazers in 2005 that the overseas takeover by foreign invaders got into full swing. Personally, I don't blame Chelsea fans for showing their love and appreciation for Abramovich. He's leaving their football club in a far better place than the Glazers have achieved at Manchester United, for example. Unlike his American counterparts, he's been a regular supporter at Stamford Bridge. His £1.5 billion loan to Chelsea that he's writing off is a gift that's underwritten every piece of silverware the Blues have collected over the past 2 decades. And that is the real problem I have with this, not the current political intervention. Abramovich should never have been allowed to weasel his way into our game in the first place. Neither should our Premier League custodians have allowed thinly veiled state-sponsored investments at Manchester City and Newcastle United. If the UK government really meant what they said when they proclaimed football clubs are cultural assets and the bedrock of our communities, we're committed to protecting them, then now is the time to give football back to the people. It's time to outlaw any foreign investor taking control of our community assets. Simply picking on Chelsea alone after they've benefited from dirty money from nearly 20 years is pure hypocrisy. Already this year we've knighted war criminal Tony Blair. The Tory government is largely funded by Russian money, and we all know Boris Johnson colluded with the Russians to weaken Europe with Brexit. How about the Tory government standing down because of their links with Russia? It's pure hypocrisy and double standards. While Abramovich and Chelsea are singled out for punishment, the Saudis are given special treatment. And why? Because we rely on their business. They buy our weapons, which they use to kill people in the Yemen. The same goes for the UAE. But Boris Johnson arrived in Abu Dhabi this week on the way to Saudi Arabia as he currently begs the Gulf states to increase their production of oil and gas. How twisted is that? Human rights violations are human rights violations wherever they happen. It's a world full of hypocrisy and convenient selective criticism. But it's not just politicians ignoring the human rights abuses in the Gulf, it's football managers too. When Eddie Howe avoids the issue and declares he's only employed as a football manager, it's just not good enough in the modern world. When Saudi Arabia beheads 81 people in one day in the largest mass execution in modern history, we want to know why it's okay to take money from this brutal regime, while Russians alone are being singled out for punishment. The irony is that sanctions against Russia will punish ordinary people in the UK when inflation spirals out of control on the back of the soaring price of oil and gas. And to cap it all off, our Arab friends have so far ignored pleas to help stop those costs soaring by producing more oil and gas. And how long before none of us can even afford to go to a football match because we've been impoverished by the sanctions we've imposed on Russia? Oh, and did I mention one of the leading bids to buy Chelsea has come from Saudi Media Group, who've tabled a bid believed to be in the region of $2.7 billion. If the Stamford Bridge club's ownership passes from the hands of a dubious Russian to the Saudis, then we've learned absolutely nothing about fit and proper ownership of English football's community assets. As some of us have been saying since long before the collapse of last year's Super League fiasco, it's time for an independent regulator to clean up football ownership. On previous evidence, the Premier League has shown it's totally incapable of protecting our leading football clubs and the football pyramid as a whole. The difference this time, of course, is the sale of Chelsea Football Club must be approved by the government. So the British public will hold our politicians accountable if they sell to the Saudis or the Americans. If we're really interested in protecting our community assets, then surely the likes of Nick Candy, the London businessman and Chelsea season ticket holder should be given the keys to Stamford Bridge ahead of any foreign invader.